The long story short is that I got into this messy divorce. The biggest question to myself was, how am I ever going to date again? I'm a 5'8" Asian guy, so standing out on dating apps is not something that I thought I could do here in the West. So what I did was, I was on Instagram and then I said, hey, if I send you a lunch via Uber Eats, would you hang out with me for 30 minutes? And the overwhelming response was, yes, I absolutely want to do this. And this is where this started. And within the first 3, 4 months, we went to Latam and we signed up over 400,000 people, of which 70% were women. And their initial reaction was, I want to get to know someone outside of my society. And then we built an office in Southeast Asia. We onboarded another 300 plus thousand people. And that's one of our fastest growing markets. And we have an office based in Manila, Philippines. And now we're opening Eastern Europe as well. So in total, we're over 1.3 million people, of which 60, 70% were women from all shapes, sizes, all walks of life. They want to get to know something aside from their society. And that's the power of the internet. That's the power of social.
Are there any couple women's stories that really stand out to you that you think about?
I remember talking to this one girl from Venezuela. She came to Colombia from Venezuela because it's really a step up. She said, hey, I'd love to see you. However, I came here to work for this family friend who was going to be my boss and who was going to help me out. And along the way, he started putting me on lockdown, keeping me as his escort, essentially. She says there's no way for me to get out because I couldn't really tell my family because my family were going to be attacked. They were going to be ashamed of me. I didn't have any way out. So I said, "What? So what do you do at that point?" She says, one of the things that I'm actually thinking about doing is actually going to the US. And I said, "How are you going to get to the US?" And she said, "I'm thinking about crossing the Darien Gap." And I said, that's probably the most dangerous place in the world. It's filled with cartels, it's filled with like drugs, it's filled with like unsafe, you name it, right? But I think she did it. She actually crossed the Darien Gap through all of Central America, and she was able to actually land in the US as a legal immigrant. Well, now, again, not every person who is from a developing country is impoverished. For example, one of the longest relationships that I had was with a woman from Barranquilla in Colombia. She wasn't impoverished. She came from a really religious and smart family, and she studied to be a lawyer. Hardworking, funny. We traveled together, and she just said it doesn't matter if it's just you and me sharing a bag of chicharrones, which is essentially pork rinds. If we just spend time, I'm happy. That's like the charm that you rarely see in America. Now, I used to live in the South in the US, and at that time, I believe that people were a lot more genuine. But now that I've lived in New York City for 20 plus years, there's a whole culture of how much are you worth? What can you do for me? And that user culture is not something that I feel comfortable in, let's say, for the rest of my life.
One thing I was thinking about today is that a lot of critics of passport bros, people who move abroad to meet women, whatever term you want to use, is, oh, these women are just using you for money. That's actually more true in America than you find it in other parts of the world. When you grow up or you live in New York for so long, the idea of people actually having genuine connections seems so absolutely foreign. It seems like kind of an anti-Tinder, where the point of it is to meet the person as quickly as possible. And like you have situations, especially when people are traveling, where you do the explore mode, and then you put your Tinder to the other country, and then the second you get there, you have like 15 dates lined up, and then you leave. If you're somebody who wants to move abroad to actually like have a real relationship, this allows you to get to know them for a month, 2, 3 months beforehand, before even going down there. Have you had users that have reached out to you and said, "Hey, I've kind of like met someone special and I'm in a real relationship because of this"?
Many, many. I mean, the reality is that we didn't build this to be a hookup app. Because if you look at Tinder, Tinder built it specifically to hook up.
Yeah.
And that Bumble's devolved into these days as well. Because if you look at the dynamics of what dating apps do, let's say if you have 10 women, 10 men, right? all of the men swipe right on every girl because their reply rates are so small. So typically in that 1 to 2%. And then that 1 to 2% typically replies to a lot of people. So you're one out of many. So we designed Crema social with intention, because you can't like ask out a lot of people for lunch. That's just like you like on a given week, if you walk down the street here in New York or anywhere else, you can't ask out 20 people for lunch because you're on the hook for 20 lunch dates. You
So,
could, but you better be rolling in it, right?
yeah.
So but and certainly you can't go for 100, right? So the reason that you typically like the way that we see what our users do is they typically come on here, talk to probably, 10 people because what they do is just invite them to lunch, see if they'll accept. Within 24 hours, that other person will say either say yes, no, or not reply. And if they don't, you just move on.
Yeah.
And if the implies say yes, then you get to have a lunch together. You don't even have to actually chit chat because that wastes a lot of time. So once you put that out there and people say, all right, this is something I want to do, then you get on the phone. I mean, I say, so I'm sorry, you get on a video call through our app, and then all of a sudden you don't feel like a stranger anymore because at first it's a little awkward. We try to use a little icebreaker to break you in to make sure that you get to smile a little bit with each other, and then the rest is yours.
So you mentioned that you have South America, Southeast Asia, and also Eastern Europe. Um, who do you prefer out of the three?
I have a type. I've learned that a long time ago. I want someone who is genuine, who's happy. If you look at every organization, there's typically a structure, right? There's always leaders and there's people who support the leaders. Because if you have 100 different visions, that organization won't take off. Typically, you have to march towards the same tune. You have to actually move towards the same pace. And to me, that's actually really important in a family construct as well. You typically have someone who leads and someone who supports. Because then if you have two alphas, you're always going to be fighting, trying to outdo each other, trying to, make things better. That may work in some cases, but the reality is the best relationships I've seen are typically a yin and a yang. And this is why men in general like societies like Colombia and Philippines, Thailand, Venezuela, because there's an onus in that society where the family grows up together. Most of the time, children don't leave the household until they're in a very serious relationship or married. And how many times have you gone to any society in this world and you just randomly approach, let's say, a Latina family, or if you randomly approach a Filipino family or a Southeast Asian family, and they're just together on the lawn, barbecuing, having a good time. And it's not just two people, right? It's the extended family, it's the kids. That's what I want.
I got married like 2 weeks ago, and I had all these friends from America. They kind of had the culture of America, and then like there was the culture, like her culture, and
Sure.
just like very basic precepts were just so foreign to her. Like there were multiple friends of mine who just didn't want kids, and as a Venezuelan, she's like, "What do you mean you don't want kids?" It's like such a basic part of life that you're gonna have a family, and it seems like in the culture in America, it seems like there's a huge force that's fighting against family and just does not want people to have families. Even the people who do have families, it seems like society kind of pushes you to break up the family. I saw an interview with somebody where she was talking about actually affairs are good for a relationship. And I was just like, what? Like, the problem when you're dating in America is you're dating women who get this horrible, horrible advice pushed to them 24/7. And even if they come in with the best intentions, their entire support system and ecosystem seems built to destroy the relationship. Whereas, with my wife, we obviously get in arguments, every couple does. But whenever we do, we talk to her mother, we talk to her sister, who both have a vested interest in us staying together. Versus when you're in America, you talk to a therapist, you talk to a divorce lawyer, you talk to all these people who have a vested interest in your relationship falling apart. So, of course, families are stronger in the area where your support system is built for you to last versus the one where every single person is hoping for your relationship to break up so that they can milk you for money.
I remember back in high school, everybody wanted to have a good relationship and everybody wanted something to last. Maybe things have changed because that was 30 years ago. But the reality is, people still wanted to be happy. And when they get played, they put up a shell around them, and then those walls just continue to build until they say, things suck. And that's what really happens in the West for men and for women. So what I think is that like not just men, women also will find it more refreshing outside of our society to actually date people who haven't gone through so much toxicity, who haven't gone through so much just crap around relationships because people don't trust each other. Because as soon as they're happy, I mean, or as soon as they're unhappy here in the West, they start thinking, maybe I need to get out because there's always a choice. Yes and no. There's a choice, but it's a question upon whether you want to take that choice or not. Because not only are you destroying yourself, you're destroying the whole social nucleus of a family. And that's something that you, just like you said, is very foreign in many other societies. Because if you got a problem, let's yell it out. I mean, there's a reason they call South America and also Southeast Asia the chancla culture or the slipper culture, right? You figure it out.
America, both groups are becoming very unhappy because everyone,
Uh,
immediately walks to the door.
I think actually women have it harder than men because they have a time clock. They have a biological time clock that we don't face as much, even though we do face in terms of our limitation of years that we can live. So if you think about it, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, a typical woman, they have a family much earlier in their 20s because that was the whole social family construct. Now, as women became more successful and became more educated, and just let me say that again, that's a really, really good thing because I always believe in female empowerment. But when that happened, families get pushed or family plans get pushed to much later, if at all. So typically women go through their 20s building their careers, having a lot of fun because they're bad bitches, and rightly so, because they have the education, they have the career, they have everything that you need in life to succeed. But what that does is actually pushes family plans to later, right? So in your 20s, let's say if you have a good relationship, I typically define a good relationship as 2, 3 years or more. You only get like two or three of those max if you're doing them back to back, right? You can hook up a bunch with a lot of different people, but you only get good relationships very rarely. Now, if you don't really lock down a good relationship, and if that relationship doesn't gel and mold, by your early 30s, a woman typically has lost 90% of her eggs. And the rates of miscarriage really goes up. You know, it, there's it's not a myth. When early 20% in your early 30s from 5% in your 20s, 30 to 40% in your mid 20s. I'm sorry, mid 30s. And then later in your 30s, it goes up to close to 50% or more. I mean, that means like even if you were lucky enough to get pregnant with your partner, there's a 50% chance that you will lose that child. And that's a really traumatic thing because it happened to me.
Oh wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
It was a 5 year journey for our first child, and I supported her through everything. And it was a traumatic experience. But that even that time, every second that goes by, every day that goes by, every year, it lengthens the time that you could potentially have a child. So what I've learned is that dating a woman in her 30s, even though she's at her prime, you can have a lot of different options. You can freeze your eggs, you can actually go through in vitro, which is extremely expensive. It does limit your options in terms of being able to actually have a family, have children. And for any man whose desire is to actually procreate and to make sure that he cares for his next generation, that's very difficult. I think partly this is why you see a lot of men who say, I have to date younger.
There's a stigma against like dating younger, but there's not a stigma in America against dating men who are taller. There's no stigma against dating men who are richer, right? Like the stigma. I think the stigma is pretty self-serving, and the stigma only exists amongst older women. Like younger women don't have a stigma against dating. I think it's a very self-serving stigma that people do. But I do think that like that opens up an interesting conversation where obviously I don't think you're telling anybody how to live their life, and I'm not telling anybody how to live their life. But if you were to like advise somebody, let's say like a man and a woman, they're 20, like 22 right now, fresh out of college, of like what you think like kind of the best route in life would be. 22 just out of college,
Yeah.
what do you think the advice would be from you?
When we were in high school, The people who got pregnant, you looked at them, you're like, oh man, you ruined your life. You're not gonna become anybody because you're just not there. But now you look at those people and they're the happiest people on earth. Yes, they felt like they made a mistake when they were in high school getting pregnant early. They were, seen as not being able to actually ascend to the next tier, but they had children. A lot of them, their children had children, and they're the happiest because they have family around them. If I would have gone back, could I have built something with somebody earlier? Potentially, but you have to meet the right person, which is really rare. So when women want their 6'5" dude who's ultra wealthy, the amount of people who fit in that category is like literally in the 0.00 percentages. Most people have delusion in terms of who their partner should be. Like if I were to go back and advise myself, look for honesty, look for support. That's probably the most important thing. Look for someone whose parents will approve of you because they want you to be happy, not because they say, well, he's not this or she's not that. In New York, go to Central Park. Everybody does picnics, they hang out. The biggest and the happiest families are not the friend groups that get together because those come and go. It's the families that get together that illegally sneak in a small grill that's just like barbecuing, and they're like everybody looks to them because they have the best smells in terms of food, in terms of drinks. Everybody prepared in the morning, so you have like 20 items instead of like just a bottle of wine that they snuck in. That's what happiness is about.
I completely agree. Like the people who are happiest in life have their family around them. In New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles, you just have these like status games that permeate everything, and it just makes everybody constantly miserable. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in San Francisco. He was telling me about how like they're like tiers of golf clubs, and he's talking to me about like I want to get into this golf club and this golf club. And it's like all he thinks about. Leaving America and looking back onto it kind of feels like I left a cult. You spent half your life now in South America, East Asia, and Eastern Europe, and half your life back in America. How does that feel jumping between these two different worlds all the time?
And I don't think is that there's anything wrong being an alpha male or alpha female who executes in a large city because they want the best for their career. If you just want to always show off and if you want to, have status this, brand that, cool. This is a place for you. But if you don't, if you want something better, if you want peace, because something else I learned is as people get older, what they want is peace, especially men. For men, we want peace. And to get peace is to make sure that you hitch yourself to someone that don't have this mindset that I have to get this, I have to get that. Look what Susie's husband is doing. Look what Johnny's, doing because, I should have had X with him. That keeping up with the Joneses mentality wrecks marriages, wrecks unions, wrecks everything. And that happens a lot in larger cities. So this all kind of flywheels back to what I was originally talking about. Have someone who is a leader in a relationship and have someone who's a supporter. Now, it doesn't have to be in all areas because a lot of times you want someone who is a supporter to be a leader in certain areas. For example, if you're raising a child on a day-to-day basis, if you're leading outside, building companies, building your career, potentially whoever the supporter is can be a leader in the home as well.
That's exactly how my relationship is set up, where we just kind of, I mean, we haven't like written down lists, but we have like very specific things that I'm in charge of, and we have specific things that she's in charge of. And I think it makes life a lot easier when you have these clearly demarcated lines of you're in charge of this, I'm in charge of this. We're not going to fight about who's in charge. We know who's in charge of each situation. Like the idea of being a supporter is seen as a negative thing, like being the person who's supporting the other person in a relationship. Everyone wants to be the alpha now, and you kind of have this inability of anybody to say, hey, I'm going to take a back seat. And when you have a relationship, you have two people constantly trying to become the alpha. So it kind of,
Exactly.
again, it kind of seems like the culture kind of puts up relationships in America to fail by telling everybody you can't be Scottie Pippen, you have to be Michael Jordan all the time. It's
Yeah.
like I remember reading this like Michael Jordan like 50th birthday article on like ESPN, and he just seemed like the most miserable human being on earth. He seemed like somebody who was completely unhappy 100%. And then I watched this documentary on Neymar Jr.
Okay.
On Netflix, and he also just seems like the most miserable, unhappy person on planet Earth. And it seems like we hold up a lot of people who dedicate their entire lives as you mentioned, to unbalanced success. Because the only way you can become Michael is by 100% dedicating yourself to that. And then you ask the question, like, yeah, they're successful. I mean, he's obviously the GOAT, like he's the greatest basketball player of all time, but is he like a happy person? Like, would you rather be the best and be miserable all the time? Or would you rather be a person who's just like, yeah, I made $10 million in the NBA, $20 million, but like I have a happy, healthy life and family. I think that people who try to move to Latin America and Asia are like, actually, I think I'd rather be the guy with $20 million and a happy family.
Look at Kobe. Kobe's world is basketball and his daughters,
Yeah,
with a very supportive Latino wife.
that's the key.
Reality, right? So, but because I think people around you really start molding you. Of course, he made his mistakes, but along the way, like I think he was molded into a person that loved his family, and he was dedicated to his family. He was always there for his family. I mean, like, think about how many times people saw him at his daughter's practices because he was there for them every step of the way, molding them into versions of himself who are strong, who are dedicated, who can get stuff done, and who still love family.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that is the fucking true goat of life, right? Because I don't know much about Jordan's families, and he might want to keep it private, but all I hear about is his gambling, aside from his greatness.
As somebody who has had a gambling problem myself, it's not indicative of a person who has a happy life. Like I've gone through several phases of my life where I've gambled a lot, and looking back on it, I'm always like, yeah, that was when I was the most miserable in my life. Was you need that
Gambling is
extra,
soul.
yeah,
Like Asians gamble more than any other race out there by like a large magnitude. To the point where like Singaporeans can't even go into their casinos because they want to limit them from gambling.
oh
This was
really?
back years ago. I don't remember if it's Singaporeans cannot go into Singaporean casinos. They make it for other types of people. Because I was going with a colleague of mine. This is many, many years, like 20 something years ago. And he was like, I can't go in. I said, what? What? Why could you go in? He says, I'm Singaporean. I can't. This is made for first. When you meet someone, when you hang out with someone, that's a gamble, isn't it? Because you never know what it's going to turn out to be. Because it's easy to get married because it takes what, a day to get married, just sign some certificates, everybody's happy. But it takes what, an average of 5 to 10 years to get through a messy divorce.
The gambling analogy is interesting because I remember, so I've been to Vegas, I think 8 times in my life, and 7 of those times, one of those times that this is not the case, but 7 of those times I was able to pay for my entire Vegas trip with gambling winnings. And on top of that, bring money back. My principle for it has always been you need to walk away as quickly as possible. You need to go on a hot streak, make your money, and then leave, stop gambling. Because what the casinos want is for you to keep on gambling. And when you keep on gambling, the math, you know, works against you, right? And I think the reason why I bring that up is I think that's an interesting analogy for relationships, as you mentioned, like life is a gamble, where the people who have happy relationships, I feel, are the people who find somebody may not be the absolute perfect person, but is like 9 out of 10 or whatever. And it's just like, okay, great. I'm taking my chips off the table. This is the person I'm going to build a life with them. While the unhappy people are the ones who have too many choices, too many options, and then keep on looking for, I want a guy in finance, 6'5", blue eyes trust fund. And as you said, very, very small people like that. And so they may have had the best possible person that they can get when they're 27, but now they're
Yep.
32, and they didn't take the chips off the table, and the house always wins.
That's why I always believe you do things with intent. I mean, there's some non-negotiables for you. Do you want to make a conscious choice to have kids? Do you want to make a conscious choice to actually build a family that's everlasting? And hell or high water, we're going to work the shit out.
Yeah,
Do you want to actually do something where, like you're going to be proud of me and you're going to emotionally support me every step of the way because that's going to be part of our vows, not just, like I promise to do this. No, no, emotional support. I've learned through everything that's the most important thing in life. If you don't emotionally support your partner, if they're not top of the top when it comes to everything in life, that thing is going to fall apart sooner or later.
where is your dating life right now? Do you find yourself circling the drain, finding somebody who you think could be the one, or are you still, kind of open on the market using CremaSocial?
I mean, the reality is I found someone who I thought was amazing. We dated for about a I thought this was the love of my life. Like I hate to even say this, but I truly believe I love her more than the woman that I was married to for over 10, 15 years. Because the way that there was just very little expectations except for me to just be me. And that was the most precious thing ever. It wasn't because, if you look at all these Western societies, like Cheesecake Factory isn't good enough anymore, right? Like you want Nobu, like that's the standard. That $300 a night is the standard. I have to do X because I look great in Y. Then I can be posted on Instagram because, everybody else will like my story, gives me dopamine. But that woman, she was just simple. She was happy. She was highly educated. She was funny. We talked every day, morning to night. That's all it took. That's the bag of chicharrones type of girl. Like I'm happy with you just hanging out, just doing that. Currently, I'm just dating, right? So there's plenty of people on CremaSocial.
And you were talking about non-negotiables. Like one of my big non-negotiables in life is I want to have a big family. I want to have 6 kids, and I want her to be able to stay at home and raise the kids. We want to be able to have like an affordable life, and then also one that we can actually enjoy.
In Philippines, like when you go to Manila, go to a place called BGC or Bonifacio City. How should I put this? It's like Beverly Hills on steroids. Or like a New York without all the trash everywhere, all the rats everywhere. Like it's so clean, it's so nice, and it's very, very affordable.
Yeah. We were staying in like the Beverly Hills of Asuncion, and we were paying like $800 a month for a two-bedroom apartment with a living room, a kitchen, and a pool on the roof. And we were
But
like, even that seemed too expensive, but it is funny, like we kind of see the whole idea of like stuff being behind glass at CVS as being normal in America. And I've been living abroad for 2 years. I don't think I've seen that anywhere. And you actually have the nice areas in other countries are actually nice versus in America.
I mean, so much nicer. I mean, the reality is food, trips, everything is so much cheaper. I
Yeah.
mostly just go to other countries to work, but just remember the beach is always free.
Yeah.
And pick a location that's near the beach because you won't ever regret life because, who sits on a beach miserable? Nobody does, right? So
Yeah.
you
It's
go to a beach,
impossible.
you're actually happy, right? So like you just take a bus for 2, $3 to a beach. Like even if you lived in bustling, hustling Manila, where like the beaches there is not great, 2 hours down south, some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, some of the world-class diving, where National Geographic goes to like explore different, like new type of animals. So
Yeah.
like in those communities, like once you meet someone, they instantly smile and they say, "Hi, sir. Hi, ma'am." Like it just makes life so much better.
Just for people who kind of want some travel advice, what do you think are like five really great spots that like people don't really know about, people, kind of under the radar spots that people should try out?
Any place that's not already a tourist boom, like off the beaten path type of places.
I completely agree about off the beaten path. Like when people are moving or going abroad for the first time, I still
Yep.
recommend places like Medellin, Thailand. Like I think those places are good for a first time traveler just because they kind of have like safety rails for you. But like if you're
Ooh,
going like a second or third
ooh,
time,
ooh,
I'm a
mm.
big believer
I
in off the beaten
completely
path
disagree.
place. Okay.
You go to those places like Medellin and Thailand, right? Like, because they go down there, they wave their passports around, they think that, oh yeah, I'm hot. I'm gonna be a hot shot. I'm gonna get here. All these girls are gonna flock to me. You don't think they have tourists in their society? You don't
Yeah.
think there's gringos or all types of foreigners in their society already? You don't think they're tired of all these tourists coming down for a week and say, how do I get to meet someone? And how do I have some, fast fun? You don't think that happens
Yeah.
all the time? A lot of the locals don't even want to see these guys anymore because they're so like they label them as gross, even if you're a good person. So what happens typically is that they don't get to meet potentially guys or girls that they might want to see, and then they head down to the red light districts. And to me, that's a really bad thing. Like why go somewhere else just so that you can pay for action?
Yeah.
It sucks because most people want to meet someone naturally, genuinely, spend time with them, and then explore things with them and not feel like they're obliged to do things. But again, it's magnitudes of difference, right? Because again, if you do something here, it's 10 times as the cost versus actually a developing country. if you meet someone who's worth it, who's willing to communicate with you, then find somewhere where you can go together and spend time. Whether that's a small village, whether like Medellin is just known for its nightlife. You want to go party, you want to go drink for a little bit. It's just a cheaper version of Miami and a lot more dangerous. So for
Yeah,
me, it's not safe at all. If you want to go safe, you go down south to Manizales. It's a lot better culture, like much safer town than Medellin. So in Thailand, of course, they have a lot of monuments, tourism set up. Asia's relatively a lot safer than South America,
way
but
safer.
there's still a lot of issues there
Yeah,
that's because overcrowding, tourism, people rip you off, people steal stuff. Like to me, like still like go visit the sites, stop off in Bangkok for like a day or two, see all the beautiful historical sites. Head to the beach, head to the smaller towns. Like right now, even in Thailand, a lot of the beaches are overfilled, but Philippines, not so much.
long term, you should find those spots that no one is going to. And the funny thing is, like, those are kind of impossible to find on like Google or whatever, because, or like, even on places like TikTok, because people, people are only talking about the places that everyone else is talking about because that's what the algorithm
That's
pushes.
why you gotta meet a local. I mean, this is what
Exactly.
you buy a CremaSocial is that you actually just say, you know what, I'm gonna buy you a lunch. Let's just chat and let's talk about life and let's talk about places because those locals know best. They actually know who and where and how you should go. And a lot of times, like they'll invite you into their family picnics. Like I can't count the times how many times like I'm traveling solo in the Philippines. All of a sudden, like a family just says, "Oh, you're alone? Come here. We have plenty of food."
Yeah.
Like that makes your trip. You'll remember that a lot more than going to a place and trying to actually figure out like how much you want to pay for drinks or how you're going to get somebody's attention. Do the work ahead of time. In Indonesia, there was a town that I used to go to many, many years ago called Manado, which is actually very close to a diving spot, which is one of my heavens on earth called Bunaken. It's a very, very small island, right? In those little towns, like people are so friendly. They'll literally just, like they see that you're a foreigner. They know the stigma that goes along with foreigners but at the same time, they're not out there trying to actually pick your pocket every day. It's just
Yeah.
like, this is my culture. I'd love to share it with you. This is what I need. For example, like I would buy crabs from the market, and then another lady's like, I can cook it for you if you can just give me a little bit of money. How much can you give me? Like, just whatever you think is right, because typically this is what the restaurant charge. Like, just make it worth my while, and I will try to do my best for you.
Yeah.
There's a transaction because, it's only fair, but at the same time, like, it's not like, oh, I'm going to charge you foreigner prices.
I found that like coming back to Thailand, there's some places that I found that they don't have any prices listed, and I realized like, oh, this business this so they could charge two different prices. There's the Thai prices and the foreigner prices as well.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I do think you're right that like in general, go to the small towns, and that is a great part about Crema Social is that you can it shows where people are, and so you can you're not just going to be people in Medellin or whatever. And I think that like one thing that a lot of people don't realize until they actually go there, specifically like Medellin, like Hio, these types of places, is they've seen so many Americans. Like they are your first Colombian, you are their 10,000th American. And
Not just even like not even America. They've seen people around the world.
yeah.
Not unique. You're their first Colombian. You're their like 10,000s or 100,000s American, and they essentially have their guard up against you unless you prove yourself otherwise.
Yeah, and it's hard to prove yourself otherwise because they have their guards so far up. And again, like I think personally, I do think those are still worthwhile places to visit, but like I do think that the smaller places are a lot better. I'm really excited to visit the Philippines. Like everything that I've heard people say about it is amazing. Do you have any other countries that you really recommend that people might not be thinking about?
All the Western European countries are great, but a lot of times, again, you have to get out of the cities again, right? Like, it's one thing that I did in my past is that I just took a car and actually drove up and down the wine trails and just visited the families with the wineries. And actually, we tasted the wines in their basements. They welcomed you in. It's typically, courtesy to buy like a bottle at the time.
Yeah,
Like I truly believe people are people, and yes, social media is poisoned a lot and it skewers more to the West. So, the things in the West are a little bit more poisoned. But even in the West, like if you go to like, let's say, I used to live in Kansas City in the first part of my life right after college. People there are the best in the world, you know? And what do? They go to a place called Lake of the Ozarks, or they just call it the lake. And those people are fun, they're happy, they're very much like the culture in Latin America, they're very much like the culture in Asia. So like when this toxicity hits, it's really in the top tier cities because people do that as a survival mechanism.
Yeah. And it's funny because like that's a great point. Like we think of it as America versus the rest of the world, but I think it really is like a rural versus urban dynamic, and even in these small places. I've noticed that when you start to travel, there are a lot of places that kind of seem just like local versions of New York. Or if not local versions of New York, then local versions of like Los Angeles or whatever. Like we went to Kotor, Montenegro, which is one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. I highly recommend visiting it. But in terms of
Good.
like a local culture, like it is just like made for foreigners. Like you literally, there was a street by the water that we went down, and I think there were 8 restaurants. Every single one had the exact same menu. I mean, literally, like printed copies of each other, and you're just like, and it was all like American food, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, there are certain places in the world that just kind of feel like infected with this because they're trying to get the 28-year-old marketing manager who works at a tech company in San Francisco to go there.
Something authentic, you got to go off the beaten path. You got to have a local show you around. You got to do the work ahead of time. You got to actually get to meet a lot of people ahead of time. They'll tell you, they'll advise you, and then you actually get to make friends and potentially it develops into something. This is a new dynamic because dating and travel have changed since 30 years ago. The toxicity has permeated the entire social sphere because of social media. And if you want happiness, it's not online, it's
Yeah.
offline. And the way that you get to offline is to get online because there's a lot of these in real life events because people are gravitating towards playing paddleball and all these things. But you meet one person and you're still competing in a small group. And that dynamic, you meet one person like every what, 2, 5 months potentially, and it could
Yeah.
potentially, but online there's numbers. So numbers is not a bad thing. Numbers is a good thing, but how do you combine numbers with intent?
Yeah.
How do you get results?
I don't know what the exact percentages are, right? But like 70% of women go after like 5% of men, right? Or whatever that is. So you have these like societies like New York City where like, 5% of men get 70% of the matches or whatever, right? But the interesting thing is that when so you have social media that's kind of tearing this dynamic apart where the other 95% of men are left out hanging, right? And then also the
What
women are also in a position where they're all competing for the same men. It hurts both people. But then the nice thing about apps like CremaSocial or just moving abroad is it's kind of like you took my small community and made it large with Tinder. Now I'm going to take this app and make it even larger and allow myself to compete.
you know, what I see? I'll give you a last example before we go. What's the biggest amount of employment in America?
Thing.
Truck drivers.
What?
Truck drivers.
Truck drivers. Okay.
Restaurants, definitely,
Yeah.
but in terms of a ubiquitous job, not
Yeah.
just like stores because restaurants, there's so many different functions, but restaurants as well, right?
Yeah.
But truck drivers are 2.53% of the economy. I'm sure servers are even larger than that when you actually take that as a whole. But in general, let's say if you were a man, just speaking about men for issues for a second, if you were a man, if you were a truck driver, who wants to date you?
It's tough.
Pretty tough, right? Like, of course, you're going to find really nice people out there who say, you know what, this is my life because I love him, so forth and so on. But in reality, when you tell anybody that you're a truck driver, the chances are you're not getting that date because of your occupation, even though you make really good money, like 100, 150K.
Yeah.
You know what we're seeing people increasingly do? They're essentially driving trucks for, let's say, 10 months or 11 months out of the year. They move down to South America for the last month, or they go to Asia for the last month. They get to know people ahead of time via CremaSocial, or potentially, just organically when they get on the ground. It's a lot tougher when you're on the ground. And then they actually get to meet friends, they get to meet potential, people who actually like them, and then they start communicating with those people again. That's actually a big trend that's actually happening. So you see a lot of blue collar people saying, I can't live up to expectations. There's that other 95%, even white collar people who can't meet the right person, who just say, you know what? I'd rather spend my time, spend my weekend, spend my months of vacation in another place. And
Yeah, I've
that's,
actually seen that. Because I have a lot of people who reach out to me. Like, I get like 2 or 3 messages a day from people, and I've had a
yeah,
bunch of people who are blue collar people. Like, I didn't even think about that phenomenon, but they have that exact problem where they're like, hey, you know, people look down on me because of this blue collar job. And I mean,
that,
I think it's a weird thing about America where, you do have this, and it's not even about earning potential, as you mentioned. Like they make a lot of money, like truck drivers, but your occupation defines so much of who you are,
yeah,
and in other parts of the world, it doesn't. Your occupation doesn't matter. It's just a thing you do, and like your family and who you are as a person matters so much more.
exactly. It's not even a liberal thing or it's not a conservative thing. Like people from all across the gamut have these issues.
Yeah.
So, it's not about immigrants. It's not about it's about finding the right person for you, whether that's friendship or love.